Hi there, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Loving here, and I am going to help you to complete your first Wix matrix for our ecology unit. And there are two different objectives for this particular unit. The first objective, which we'll be focusing on today, is to understand that ecosystems have biotic and abiotic resources that interact with one another. Here are the 6 questions for you to complete your Wix. If you need to pause the video, now would be a good time to take care of that and copy the questions. Now let's get started. An ecosystem is an area in which biotic and abiotic resources interact with one another. Well, you might be wondering what biotic is. Biotic is simply living things, and abiotic is simply non-living things. Biotic are the living parts of the environment, and abiotic are the non-living parts of an environment. There are several different types of ecosystems that I'm sure you have studied throughout the past years. Here are just a few of them: the freshwater, the saltwater, rainforest, deciduous forest, desert, there's the tundra, the Arctic, so many different types of habitats and ecosystems out there. In the freshwater ecosystem, we have got some abiotic resources such as the sand, soil, rock, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. And within that same ecosystem, we also have several biotic resources. The vegetation such as the lily pads, the grass, the animals that are within that particular ecosystem such as bass, perch, catfish, insects, frogs, and turtles, and much, much more. In the marine ecosystem, we have got several abiotic or non-living resources: the sand, the rock, dirt, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. And as well as biotic, we've got lots of living things such as sponges, reefs, seaweed, crabs, fish, turtles, krill, and squid, and much, much more. Now moving on into the terrestrial ecosystems, which are the ecosystems that are found on land. There were several different habitats and ecosystems to choose from. I just kind of chose a few. Some of the abiotic resources would be the soil, the dirt, the rocks, the oxygen, which is needed for the animals to breathe, and the carbon dioxide, which is needed for the plants to conduct photosynthesis, as well as the water and or ice and snow. Many living things that are found on land would be trees, grasses, algae, birds, primates, insects, bears, reptiles. Now within each ecosystem there is a flow of energy that begins with the sun, and the sun provides the energy for the plants, which are the producers, to produce their own food. And as we move up and down through the flow of energy, the energy is then from the plants is consumed by the herbivores or the primary consumers. And then those herbivores or primary consumers are consumed or eaten by the primary carnivores, also known as secondary consumers. And then finally we have the secondary carnivores that eat the primary carnivores, and they're called the tertiary consumers. And those are the top of the food chain. So you are responsible for knowing various relationships within an ecosystem. The first relationship you're responsible for knowing is the producer-consumer relationship. And as we previously discussed, the producers produce their own energy. They do not need to consume it. They produce it with energy from the sun, and they use photosynthesis to make their own food, whereas all of the consumers have to get their energy from the producers, whether it's from the producer directly itself or through the food chain. Another relationship that you are required for knowing is the predator-prey relationship. So if you take a look at this particular food web, we have got a rabbit over here that is prey to, for example, the cheetah. and the cheetah is the predator. Let's take a look at another pair of predator-prey. Over here we have an ant, and then we have an aardvark that actually eats the ant. So the aardvark is the predator, and the ant is the prey. Let's take a look at one more. Here we have the hyena that eats the aardvark. The hyena is the predator that hunts the prey aardvark. And if you notice, the aardvark can be like many other types of carnivores. They can be predator and prey. So the prey is the animal that is being hunted or eaten, and the predator is the animal that is doing the hunting or the eating. Another type of relationship that you are responsible for knowing is that of the parasite host. And so this was a little more interesting, more fun to find pictures of. There were so many parasite and host pictures out there. But as you can see right here, we have got a sea turtle, a loggerhead turtle to be specific, and it is the host to these marine turtle leeches. And this helps both of these out and able to survive within their environment. Over here we have a snapper, a red snapper, that can serve as a host to an isopod. And that isopod is basically feeding off of the snapper as the snapper is going about its business. And then something that you are more familiar with would be the fleas and ticks that your pets might have, that you can get a tick, which would also be a parasite on you. And the parasites for anything, they basically leach the blood and nutrients out of its host. So in this instance, the cat and the dog would be the host, whereas the tick or the flea would be the parasite. And then something that I know that you hear the word leech, and you tend to cringe at that sound. But these here are freshwater leeches that are feeding off of the blood of the fish, frogs, turtles, and mammals that they are using for their resources. So what we have here are just a bunch of little tiny leeches. As you know, leeches and parasites can be very useful to help keep the balance in an ecosystem, and the leeches are even useful in the medical world. So not all parasites are detrimental, but some of them are.
In terms of biodiversity, we mean a lot of different things. In this case, we're going to talk about something that's known as species richness, because that's something that we can measure. Because counting up the number of species, going out and finding out how many species there are in a given environment, is something that we can actually do. There are different species of plants, there are many different species of animals, many different species of microbes, and many different species of fungi. And they all interact in their environment to create what we would call an ecosystem. Eco is an interesting word. It's an ancient word that means house. So it's a system of what goes on in your house, that is, where we all live. All of these different organisms are interacting. They're behaving together. They're interacting with one another. Some of them eat each other. Some of them eat what others decompose into. And they, plus the physical environment, or the house, form the ecosystem. Why would the number of species, in other words, species richness, be crucial to the way an ecosystem functions? What is it about the number of species that makes the ecosystem work better and contribute to the resiliency or the stability of the ecosystem? Scientists are really beginning to study this, and the emerging field is referred to as BEF, Biodiversity Ecosystem Function. We can think of any ecosystem as species that network one to another. They have interactions with each other. They can be a lot of different interactions. They can live on top of one another, like certain birds nesting in trees, or even more crucially, these things might eat one another. This is a diagram, a network diagram of, believe it or not, a relatively simple ecosystem in which the organisms are interacting one with the other. We can draw lines between the species to indicate those interactions. And we can make the lines directional to show that material or matter and energy are moving from one species to another. When one organism takes a bite of another, it not only gets a mouthful of matter or food, but that food contains energy. So these arrows show the direction that energy is flowing from one species to another. The most important thing about these webs is that the strength of these interactions can vary. That is, the interdependence of the organisms in the web can vary. And here's something that might be counterintuitive. These interactions become less important the more species you have within a network. You can think of it as the interactions being spread among more players. But what happens when there are fewer players? Let's say we've got a really super simple set of interactions where this owl is eating that mouse, but can also eat this squirrel. This gives the owl options. If we remove one of these, take that guy right out of there, then we only have two species that are interacting with each other. And it's really easy to disturb this system. This guy will just eat all of these guys and boom, you can cause total ecological collapse. So the higher the biodiversity or species richness in a system or in a network, the stronger it is, the more stable it will be because of all the additional options open to the organisms in it. Think of that old saying about putting all your eggs in one basket. Not all interactions within a given ecosystem or network are exactly the same strength because some species have stronger interactions with each other than they do with some other species. For example,
So essentially, biodiversity is a variety of species living in the same area. So if you take a look at this low diverse area, if something were to happen to the grass, let's say the grass gets a fungus or something like that, these herbivores would no longer have food to eat, and so they would either die or they would have to move to another area, which would totally break down this ecosystem. The greater the diversity, the more options you have, as stated in that video. So over here, where you've got the highest diversity, if something were to happen to this grass, the animals have some other option of food to eat. And so it would keep that ecosystem more stable. Your support for this particular objective is you need to create a chart and you need to list some examples with relationships of the producer-consumer, predator-prey, parasite-host, and competition. Don't forget to do this section because there will be a question or two on the quiz pertaining your support. And on a final note, I found this comic. I thought it was really cute and adorable, so I hope you enjoy it, and we will see you at school. Have a great day.